Hello friends, this is Grief speaking, and today we're looking at part 2 of Everything is Fine. I asked you guys to let me know if you wanted me to cover the whole series, and you let me know. I have to give a big thank you to everyone for blowing the last video up. I was just shocked by the enthusiasm and all those new subscribers. I haven't had time to even comprehend the channel growth in the last few months, so thank you, seriously. Anyway, I don't want to take too much time here since this is a long one, so let's just get right into season 2. This is Everything is Fine Explained, part 2. So let's kick it off with episode 30, Welcome to Lakeview. A man sits upon a stone wall with a cigarette when he's approached by a woman in a red dress. She tries to bum a cigarette off him, but he says this is his last, so they decide to share it along with the conversation. It appears to be close to midnight on New Year's Eve, and the two people vaguely know each other, only meeting one other time. They recount how awkward the man was when they first met and how he was obsessed with astronomy, but he gave it up to do accounting since there was more money there. The woman says that he shouldn't give up on his dreams. Her dream is to open a restaurant one day and name it Setsuko after her mother. The man says his real dream is to be a dad. He's obviously embarrassed about this, but she reassures him that it's not a dumb dream and is actually really sweet. If you hadn't guessed it yet, the two properly introduce themselves to each other as Sam and Maggie. And as the clock strikes midnight, Maggie pulls Sam in for a kiss. It's a little odd even in silhouette to see them without their cat heads. They wish each other a happy new year, but then spot something strange. A little girl with a cat mask standing by the park. Suddenly, Sam and Maggie are sporting their cat masks as well. Sam tells her to look at their girl, and the child catches fire. Maggie cries out her name, Sarah. This is actually the first time I think we've heard it. Sam assures Maggie that everything's gonna be okay. Fire then covers his body, and we see his skeleton through his melted mask as he says, "Everything is fine." Maggie wakes up, and this was obviously a nightmare, but I do believe the start of it was an actual memory of how Sam and Maggie met. She hears a loud knock on their door and answers it to find Julian, the first resident of Lakeview that they met besides Officer Greg. He says he was heading out for his morning jog, and they figured they may need a refill on food for Winston. We learn that Sam and Maggie have now lived here 2 weeks, and Julian hands her a sack that has blood actively dripping from the bottom. You guys may remember that Winston, their dog, died early in part 1, so what the hell is this food for? Maybe they got a new dog and named him the same thing? Anyway, Julian mentions that tomorrow is the trial, and he can't wait for them to see what Lakeview is really all about. Maggie calls for Winston, saying she has something nice and juicy for him, and closes the door. Next, we see a man with a tattered cat mask in the forest. He's attempting to drink water from a creek when he's suddenly shot in the leg with an arrow. He looks in terror at his assailants and addresses them by name, saying that they once did pottery together. We see the two attackers and they say, "Sorry bud, it ain't personal. Just how things are," and a cry of pain rings out through the forest. Quite the intro to season 2 here, and already a lot of questions are popping up, so let's keep it moving. Episode 31, The Players. Maggie's going on a jog through the woods when she finds an arrow carved into a tree. She takes a closer look, but is interrupted by two Lakeview residents, Glenn and Gladys. They're out on a hike and are completely nude. They also both have designs on their masks just like Julian and the mayor, which confirms that Lakeview residents are a little less restricted when it comes to personal expression, at least in this way. Anyway, they have an awkward exchange. At one point, Gladys refers to her breasts as December pumpkins, which really made me laugh. But you get the idea. These two are free spirits and strangely content considering the messed up circumstances. Gladys says, "Do you want to know a secret? This is all there is." Next, we get a look at the town's market where Sam sells vegetables from his garden. However, all of his vegetables are pretty small and he's having a hard time growing anything worth selling. His stalled neighbor Dave is a hunter who sells furs and meat and is an all-around nice guy. Sam asks Dave more about merits and how they work around here. You might remember Officer Greg and Julian both wearing badges that had smiley faces on them at the end of part 1. Apparently, these are merits and you can buy one for $10,000, which seems virtually impossible from selling things at the market. As they talk, a woman named Becky shows up who has 3 frowny faces on her badge. Sam starts to ask her about them when Dave interrupts and tells him not to talk about the merits, especially around someone like Becky. Meanwhile, Maggie meets 2 of her neighbors, Chris and Gina. They tell Maggie not to be nervous seeing her first child tomorrow and that her and Sam can just hang back and watch how they do it. That way, when the time comes, they'll know how to get their own hands dirty. Whatever they're referring to here can't be good. Episode 32, The Game. Maggie makes a delicious looking meal for her and Sam. We don't know whether she was able to live out her dream of being a chef before everything went to hell, but she clearly has the chops for it. no pun intended. They recap their days to each other, and then Sam suggests after dinner that they have a drink on the boat. Out back on the lake, they have their own small yacht, and once inside, they talk a little more freely. Apparently, the boats seem to be completely sealed off, similar to the aluminum-covered basement from season 1. It's unclear exactly why, but they just feel less like they're being watched in here. They start off by discussing Bob and Linda, but quickly realize they should probably just move on from that. They try to think of what their next move is. The first 2 weeks were just about survival, but now they need to figure out how to save their daughter. The first thing is to try to learn more about how Lakeview works, especially the merits and the trial. Apparently the town calls them smileys and frownies, and the couple acknowledges how silly the whole thing is. If you get 3 smileys, something good happens at the trial, and if you get 3 frownies, something bad happens, but they don't know exactly what. Sam says he doesn't want to hurt anyone again or be hurt, and Maggie reassures him that as long as they stick together and watch each other's back, no one can mess with them. Outside the boat near their house, we can see an ominous figure looming with a hammer in their hand. Episode 33, The Play. On a lamppost in the center of town, we see a poster of a red fist and the words "Rise Up." Underneath it, it says "Meet at Sam and Maggie's house." Okay. Next thing you know, Officer Greg is paying them a visit. He hands Maggie the poster and she truthfully says she has no idea what it is. Greg informs her that they are spread all over town. Sam joins them and starts to say that someone must be framing them when Becky shows up wanting to report Sam and Maggie, accusing them of being the leaders of the rebellion. It's a ridiculous attempt at framing someone, and there's a beat where they just stare at her. Greg says that it doesn't make much sense based on the posters and would need more evidence. Sure enough, Becky leads them into Sam and Maggie's back garden where a hammer and nails lay in the dirt along with a stack of posters. The couple points out how absurd this whole thing is. Why would they leave this stuff out in the garden? Surprisingly, Officer Greg actually goes along with it. I guess in Lakeview, it's guilty until proven innocent. Greg says the investigation is concluded and takes off one of Becky's frownies for reporting them. For a moment, it looks like Sam and Maggie are about to be designated red status. Instead, he gives them each a frownie for the crime. He literally boops the frownie stickers onto their faces and tells them to just stick them on their badges later. They question how this whole merit system works anyway, and Greg says they'll find out soon enough at the trial. Nearby, Chris and Gina watch them and give each other a nod. Episode 34, The Rules. In the center of Lakeview, Julian takes the stage to greet the crowd. He thanks them for attending what is this town's most sacred duty and shared responsibility. Sam and Maggie run into Chris and Gina in the crowd. They invite Sam and Maggie to have drinks on their boat afterwards and say they have a surprise for them. Julian then introduces who he calls the architect of this beautiful system, the mayor of Lakeview, Laura, who is met with a large round of applause. She then welcomes to the stage today's trial participants. The candidates for going up are a couple, Sophie and Kate, and a guy named Jared, all of which have gotten 3 smileys. Next, the candidates for going down are Tyler and Jane, a couple that have blood smears all over them, and another couple, Keith and Marie. The mayor gives her deepest appreciation and sympathies to them, saying that their role today is an essential part of our way of life. She goes on to start a vote for which candidate will be sent up. Apparently everyone can vote using their phones like it's American Idol or something. With 71% of the vote, the couple Sophie and Kate win and they break out in tears, saying they'll get to see their babies again. I guess if you win the vote, you are sent off to a place called Hillside where you'll be able to reunite with your children. The mayor then asks the crowd to start their vote on who will be sent down, aka red status. Out of the crowd, Gina shouts that before the vote, she has something to present. She shows off one of the Rise Up posters that were put around town and points out that Sam and Maggie clearly aren't responsible and that furthermore, they have evidence proving that Becky did it. Episode 35, The Losers. Chris and Gina pull out Becky's notebook and point out her doodles, which look identical to the drawings on the poster. After seeing the hard evidence, Greg gives Becky a demerit. She starts to panic, begging the crowd not to vote for her and telling Sam and Maggie she was just messing around. Sam actually looks a little guilty, but Maggie interrupts him saying, "This isn't up to us," and moving Becky away from them. Well, without any more dramatic interruptions, the crowd begins to vote between Tyler and Jane, Keith and Marie, and Becky. In case you're wondering, couples count as one in Lakeview, but we'll touch more on that later. Mayor Laura gets the results and simply says, "I'm sorry, Becky," before hitting a button on her phone and designating Becky red status. As usual, the comic turns red and white as Becky screams in terror over her boys who are apparently being killed off elsewhere. The mayor continues, saying that they're about to move on to the next part of the trial and tells Becky she can leave for her head start, giving everyone else 20 minutes to prepare before the hunt begins. Episode 36, The Prize. The townsfolk are now spread out a bit preparing for the hunt. Sam is holding one of the small harpoon guns we saw used during the last hunt. Chris and Gina show up surprisingly cheerful. They tell Sam and Maggie that they can always hang back here and that the hunting isn't mandatory, but they can tag along to see how it's done. Nearby, Becky is on her knees at the edge of the forest, dead quiet. Gina tells them that this is actually pretty common. The hunted are in shock usually before finally snapping out of it. Right on cue, Becky gets up and runs into the woods. Some people just sit there the whole time, and the townsfolk do a random draw to see who gets the kill. Chris explains that it's pretty obvious there's no way to make enough money to buy a smiley, so there's really only two ways to get them: to report other townsfolk for crimes, or to get the kill during the hunt and bring back their head. The couple head off, leaving Sam and Maggie to talk about it. Maggie says she feels stupid. She convinced herself things might actually be better here, but it looks like they still need to find another way. She refuses to hunt anyone, but Sam seems to seriously consider it. Getting smileys means getting closer to seeing their daughter. He also brings up what Maggie did to Tom. She gets defensive and says that it was something she had to do. Sam understands that and thinks maybe this is just another thing that they have to do. Maggie asks, "So what, you're a killer now?" And he says that he'll do whatever it takes. Just then, the hunt begins. Chris and Gina call over and Sam just says bye to Maggie, leaving her alone while he joins the hunt. Gladys, the nudist hippie lady we saw earlier, spots Maggie and has a chat with her. We learn that Glenn and Gladys never join in on the hunt. Maggie notices how close they are to being put on trial, and Gladys simply says, "It doesn't matter. This is all there is. The only thing left is to live free." After a while, the hunt ends, and out of the woods walks Sam with blood splattered across his face and clothes. Behind him walks out Chris and Gina, who are holding Becky's severed head, earning them both a smiley. Gina calls out to Maggie, showing off the head and saying that Sam did great. They'll talk all about it when they share that drink tonight. Episode 37, I Made You This. Sam and Maggie join Chris and Gina on their yacht for a drink and soak in the sun, as if they didn't just murder a person. Chris offers Sam a beer, but it's clear he's a million miles away and probably traumatized by the events of the hunt. Gina says she thinks he did great out there and to keep at it. After an uncomfortable silence, Chris pulls out a handmade vase as a gift for Sam and Maggie. This is actually what Chris does for work in town at his stall, Chris's Crafts. Gina works at the pharmacy and she mentions how everyone tries to get free sedatives from her. Anyway, Gina says time flies when you're having fun, and Sam has a harsh reaction asking if they find what they did today fun. Gina thinks it's a fair question and says they should just talk about what happened. Apparently, Becky put up quite a fight and almost did some damage to Chris and Gina, but Sam came in and held her legs down, helping them secure her head. Man, this whole season is messed up right from the get-go. Gina answers Sam's original question, saying that none of it was fun, but they just try to keep things light to make it easier. She says that before Sam can judge them, he should remember that everyone got into Lakeview by doing something terrible. And after a moment of reflection, Sam and Maggie decide, yeah, they probably shouldn't judge. Chris and Gina then invite them below deck to talk about something more secretive. They confirm that inside the boat seem to be safe from prying eyes and ears. They mention the whole foil thing, saying, "You guys figured that out, right? It took us like a year to get it." Sam and Maggie look at each other and go, "Oh yeah, only 6 months for us." Of course, if you remember from part 1, it was clear that it took over 3 years for them to figure it out. Anyway, Chris says that they seem like smart, capable people, and it's hard to make friends out here. Gina cuts right to the chase, saying she wants them to form an evil alliance. Episode 38, Here Boy. They say they even have their first target, Dave. You might remember Dave from earlier, the hunter who works next to Sam at the market. Chris says he's the perfect candidate for the first test of their alliance. He's single and he's got 0 stickers, so one frowny's not gonna hurt him. Sam puts a stop to the conversation right there, saying if they're gonna ally with anyone in Lakeview, it would be them, but he needs to talk this over with Maggie before they join. Chris and Gina think it's fair and decide they can meet up again tomorrow. Back at home, Maggie asks Sam if he's okay, and he says, not even a little bit. He heads upstairs alone, and Maggie decides she needs to feed Winston. She walks out to the back deck and dumps the bloody guts into the water. Soon, something just goes to town, eating it out of frame. Okay, so is the new Winston some kind of meat-eating aquatic creature like a shark or what? Somehow, out of all the mysteries in this series, this is the thing I want to know the most. Sam comes back downstairs and asks if they can talk in the boat. He thinks they should take Chris and Gina up on their offer. Even if they can't really trust them, for now, it could be a beneficial team-up. Maggie's skeptical and mentions the arrow she found in the woods. She believes this may be a sign from the rebels. Sam cheekily remarks that this isn't Star Wars, there is no rebellion. But Maggie wonders what happens to all of the Reds out there. Maybe they banded together. Sam's pretty harsh and dismissive, saying, so what, they can get together in the woods and mope about their dead kids? Maggie reminds him that their friend Charlie is one of those people, but Sam doesn't care. He reminds her they still have a daughter worth fighting for. After a few moments, Maggie wonders if their daughter is still the same. What if they do all these awful things and make it to Hillside, only to find that she's not there or that she isn't herself anymore? She says that the last time they saw her, their daughter called them. Maggie trails off and we don't get to find out what. Sam says all that matters is that she's alive and that they're alive, and he needs to know Maggie's with him on this. She agrees, at least until they can find a better way. But they're gonna need to keep their guards up because in the end, it's either them or Chris and Gina. The chapter ends with Sam and Maggie telling the couple that they're in. Episode 39, Friend of a Friend. Chris and Gina are stoked and think they should make up a secret handshake, but Sam and Maggie want to get straight to business. The couple tells them that the plan is to work together to slowly get 3 smileys by reporting or hunting. They plan on targeting single people rather than couples because they're easier targets and couples only count as 1 smiley anyway. So they move on to the plan regarding Dave, and Gina gets way too excited. Apparently she's always wanted to do an Ocean's 11 style heist plan, and if it was a movie, she says we would see all of this happening as she describes it. Well, it's not a movie, but it is a comic, and so that's exactly how this section works. Pretty funny fourth wall break, actually. Step 1 is already done. Last week, Chris asked Dave for help moving some pottery, and in doing so left his fingerprints all over them. Chris then used this to make a mold, and now they have a fake Dave finger. Clever and creepy. With the finger, they can access Dave's phone using the required fingerprint. The key to all of this is Sam, who works in the stall next to Dave. Chris will come by and distract him, giving Sam the opportunity to grab his phone and hand it off to Maggie. She'll use the fake finger and, using Dave's phone, send an incriminating text to Sam. After it's sent, she'll delete it from Dave's phone. Maggie will then sneakily hand it back to Sam, who will then place it back in Dave's stall. The night before, Gina will stash some stolen pills from the pharmacy in Dave's bag, and the text will make it look like he stole them and is offering some to Sam, who will then forward the text to Officer Greg. While they wait for Greg to show up, Dave comes over to Sam and Maggie and is super nice as usual. He even offers to bring them some rabbit stew tomorrow. Makes you feel pretty bad for the guy. As they chat, Greg shows up and presents the text to Dave, then finds the medication in his bag shortly after. Unlike many of the people in the series so far, Dave doesn't really freak out. He actually seems to quietly understand what happened. Greg asks Sam and Maggie if they want to formally report it, and they stay quiet. Dave ominously chimes in, saying, an officer just asked you guys a question. Is this really what you want? Man, Chris and Gina really tried to play this off like they were doing the risky part by planting the drugs, but now Sam and Maggie just made an enemy, and he's a hunter at that. Episode 40, Captain Feelbad. Maggie says, sorry Dave, but we don't like drug pushers in our town. Greg then gives Dave one demerit, telling him, don't steal prescription drugs and then sell them to your pals, you goof. There's something really funny and really disturbing about how lighthearted the characters can be at times, but then again, that's the whole vibe of this comic. Anyway, Greg gives Sam and Maggie their smileys, and the plan went off without a hitch. Dave says, I just want you to know, no hard feelings. I still consider you 2 of my closest friends. Something is really off about this, and he just turns around and leaves. Sam and Maggie both feel awful about what they did and try to convince themselves they had to do it. Chris and Gina show up and invite them over for another drink to celebrate and find their next target, but Sam says they can't tonight, and next we see him and Maggie in the yacht. They're both so guilty over what they did and talk about how Dave's going to be out for them now, so they need to keep an eye out. Sam laments the fact that they couldn't talk for 3 years, and now all they have to talk about is how messed up everything is. He decides there's no point and to just keep their eyes on the goal ahead, saving their daughter. Maggie tries to convince him to just slow down and talk to her. She says that Becky, Tom, Bob, and Linda, she sees them in her nightmares. She wonders if Sam is haunted as well. And from his perspective, we do see red silhouettes of Becky holding her head, Bob and Linda in flames, and Tom with his head bashed in. It's an eerie sight to say the least. He lies to himself and Maggie, saying he doesn't see anyone but their daughter, and decides to go for a walk. Out on the path, Sam runs into Glenn, who's chipper as always. He talks about how gorgeous this time of year is and how lucky he is to be in this town. Sam straight up asks, what's wrong with you? You feel lucky to be here? What about your kids? Glenn asks Sam to follow him. He wants to show him something. He says that him and Gladys used to be like Sam a while back. They were some of the first to arrive, and it was pretty rough, but they played the sick game. They still had that fire in them. Him and Gladys even hunted someone down once, but after a while they realized they had changed, and that any world that rewards that kind of behavior is not one they wanted to raise a family in. So they don't hunt and just keep to themselves. Sam asks why they just gave up and chose to die, but Glenn says they didn't. In fact, they chose to live. He shows Sam his backyard, which is a beautiful garden with a large variety of flowers. Back behind them, down the road, Dave watches from afar. Episode 41, This Mysterious Stranger. Back at the house, Maggie takes a look in the fridge, and honestly, I'm not really sure what's significant here other than the box that says carrots is empty. Maybe there's something important here and it'll make sense later, but anyway, after eyeing the contents of the fridge, Maggie decides to go for a walk through the woods. After a while, she finds what she was looking for, the arrow etched into the tree. She follows its direction, and sure enough, it leads to another arrow. She repeats this process until she realizes that she's actually been led in a big circle. Then someone appears behind her saying the words, "Are you cooking a turkey?" Yep, it's Judy, the woman from part 1 who gave Maggie the foil. She's no longer wearing her yellow coat, but instead a Capsule Corp shirt. If you're a fan of Dragon Ball, you probably recognize this as a direct reference to the show, and more specifically, a shirt that Trunks commonly wears. Anyway, Judy asks Maggie what she's doing here, and it's clear that she doesn't really know herself, or rather, she doesn't want to admit it. Judy tells her it's okay to speak freely here. They're in a natural dead zone in this part of the woods. She just wants to be friends and asks her again what she's looking for. Maggie says that the arrows make no sense. They just lead in a circle. She believes the arrows are a trick made by Judy to lead people into the dead zone and then deal with them. So she asks Judy, "Are you gonna deal with me now?" Judy says if she wanted to kill her, she would have never seen her coming. Maggie says she's not scared of her, and Judy says, "Well, maybe you should be." In the surrounding wood, several weapon-wielding people peek out from behind the trees. Episode 42, Third-Party Logistics. Maggie does an Arthur-style fist clench and says, "Go ahead, take your shot." The shadowed figures stay put, however, and Judy begins to laugh. She tells them to stand down and the figures disappear. Judy says she likes Maggie. She's stone cold, and more importantly, sees things the same way she does. She realizes that Maggie wouldn't come out here just to rat her out. Maggie wonders if this is all some sort of test to join the rebellion. Judy reminds her that she needs to return the favor for the foil and that the time has come. Maggie asks what she wants, and Judy says she noticed that she's been making herself some new friends. Before we find out what she's on about, it cuts back to the house with Maggie already returning home. She hears some noises coming from the back garden. Sam is covered in dirt and hard at work, ready to expand the garden, hoping that next year's crop will be 10 times bigger, and he starts rambling about everything he wants to do. Maggie can tell something is off and asks him what happened on his walk. He says he just needed to clear his mind and shoots the question back her way, asking her why she's acting so weird. He says she could help him if she wants and that he's planning to plant some fruit trees. Maybe in 5-10 years, they'll be able to make some fruit pies. This completely disarms Maggie. 10 years? Does he really think they're gonna be here that long? After an awkward pause, he just shrugs the question off and says, "Fine, don't help me." But Maggie says they need to have a talk about Star Wars. I love that Sam's offhand comment earlier is now code word for the rebellion. Episode 43, Where You're Going. In the boat, Maggie starts by telling Sam the entire backstory of how she met Judy after looking for foil. Sam points out that technically, if it wasn't for Judy, they wouldn't be alive right now. They never would have gotten the foil, and Bob and Linda would be here instead. Maggie continues telling him what happened, and we see a flashback of Judy asking her to bring her some materials. Something Maggie points out is extremely risky, and asks what the point of the rebels really is. What's the big plan? Judy simply says that if Maggie joins her, they're gonna save the world. Back in the present, Sam thinks it all sounds crazy, but Maggie asks if it's any crazier than planting trees and planning to be here for years. She then asks again what happened while he was out on his walk, and he finally opens up. He and Glenn talked a bit, played some chess, and looked through the garden. Glenn told him something that resonated with him, that this is all there is. Maggie's actually a little pissed off because she said the exact same thing to Sam earlier, but now that Glenn says it, he suddenly has a big reaction. She's starting to feel like Sam doesn't trust her, and shockingly, he actually says that he doesn't. He points out that her killing Tom was a huge risk, and just because it paid off doesn't mean it will again. If she messes up, they could die. Maggie just thinks they should explore all options here. It could be that Glenn and Gladys are right and that there is no point in fighting, but it could be that Judy is right and that there's a way to stop all of it. But either way, she needs Sam. She admits that she has been a risk, but she needs to see if Judy is legit because it might be the only way to save their daughter. So Sam can either help her or not, but it wasn't an accident that they got this far. It's because they worked together. She asks him point blank, "Are you with me or not?" Episode 44, Extend the Neck. Maggie and Gina are doing a yoga class out on the docks and gossiping about how one of the residents, named Robert, just up and left his wife in the middle of the night. Gina jokes that maybe he joined the rebels, and Maggie laughs it off as a ridiculous idea. Then, when Gina's not looking, she reaches for her bag. Later in the house, Sam and Maggie go over their secret plans. Maggie suggests they go to the boat to discuss them, but Sam says it's fine, they can talk about it here. The plan is for Sam to go over to Dave's house and steal one of his hunting traps from the garage. Then, once he has it, he takes it over to Chris's stall at the market. In the morning, Chris will step on it and be out of action for a while. They'll tell Officer Greg that Chris was sneaking around Dave's stall before. They get a smile for reporting, Dave gets a frowny, and Chris loses a foot thinking it was Dave. They discuss this plan while standing right next to the vase that Chris gave them, and it seems like they're intentionally speaking into it. Well, guess what? The thing was rigged with a microphone. Gina is listening in and tells Chris what she just heard. Sam and Maggie nod at each other, confirming that they knew the device was inside and had this dialogue here intentionally. Maggie sneaks out back and into town while Sam leaves the front door down the main path. Sure enough, Chris and Gina aren't far behind. In town, Maggie approaches Gina's pharmacy and enters using the key card she snatched earlier. Meanwhile, Chris and Gina tail Sam all the way to Dave's house, ready to take photos for Officer Greg. Only Sam doesn't break into Dave's garage. In fact, he just keeps walking past his house. They wonder why he's not following through with his plan when Gina starts to piece together what may be happening and heads out, saying she needs to check on something. At the pharmacy, Maggie is filling a bag with multiple health items, which must be what Judy requested. Outside, she hears Gina coming in the door and hides behind the counter. However, Gina cuts through the bullshit and straight up calls Maggie out, knowing she's inside. Episode 45, Catch and Release. Maggie stands up and the two coldly greet each other. Surprisingly, Gina plays it off as if Dave broke in and that Maggie was only trying to stop him. She then continues this act, thanking her for being such a good friend. Maggie plays along, saying she doesn't think he's hiding back behind the counter. Gina opens a drawer and says, "Oh no, it looks like he did get some things," and starts putting supplies on the counter. She asks Maggie if he got away with anything else, and she continues playing along, suggesting he took some heavy painkillers as well. Gina says she'll report it, but since there's no hard evidence, Greg probably won't do anything. But she's glad she has such a good friend like Maggie and that they can help each other out. So I was a little confused about this segment when I first read it, but what I think's happening is that Gina thinks that Maggie was trying to get the meds for herself and tries to reaffirm the alliance by letting her get away with it and blaming Dave. It's odd to me that Gina wouldn't use this opportunity to just report Sam and Maggie for this, but she might have bigger plans, or maybe she really is that friendly. The next day, Sam and Maggie venture out into the woods and discuss the situation with Chris and Gina, unsure what kind of wrench the whole thing is going to put in their alliance. They walk into the dead zone and imply that they can actually feel it. They've also mentioned feeling like the boat was safe and that the Faraday cage worked in part 1, so it seems like however their cat heads are wired, they can literally feel the loss of surveillance. Spooky. Sam and Maggie then talk about Judy, wondering if she's crazy. Little do they know, she's standing right beside them. After the awkward realization that Judy heard them, Maggie apologizes, and Judy laughs it off, saying that we're all a little crazy. Maggie hands off the bag of meds, and Judy mentions that she had a man on the inside, but circumstances changed. Maybe she's talking about the guy who skipped town, Robert. She then immediately asks for more supplies, specifically camping gear, but Sam cuts her off, saying they put their necks on the line for her, so before they do anything else, she needs to answer some questions. Judy actually apologizes and says, go ahead. Sam is obviously surprised she's so willing and asks her the most obvious question, which is there really a rebellion? Judy readily answers, saying, yep, there's about 50 of them, and if you follow the arrows on the trees in the opposite direction, eventually you'll see an old ranger station, which is their current base. Sam is speechless because of the fact that he just got such a straight answer. Judy says that there's still a lot she can't say or trust them with, which leads back to the mission at hand. She asks them how they feel about hunting. Episode 46, Connective Tissue. Judy gives them the next mission. During the next trial hunt, they're going to try and get to the Reds first and tell them about the arrows, hopefully leading them to safety with the Rebels as new recruits. She also tells them to buy 2 plants, a sunflower and cactus. If they need to get in touch, put the sunflower on the porch, and if they need to warn the Rebels to stay away, put out the cactus. Sam then bluntly asks why they should side with Judy as opposed to saving their daughter. Judy says that's easy. There's no outcome where they save their daughter in the system. It's a sick game and it doesn't end in Lakeview. The Rebels aren't here to play. They're here to flip the table and not only save their daughter, but to save everyone. 2 weeks later, Chris and Gina are talking in their boat about Sam and Maggie. How they act nice, but every time they try to initiate the next move for the alliance, they just dip out or brush it off. Chris asks Gina again if there was anything weird that night at the pharmacy, and Gina actually covers for Maggie, saying that there was no one there. Then someone knocks at the door and it's Dave. Apparently they have a meeting planned. They ask how he's been and he says that he actually caught a deer yesterday, but since they can't use real guns, he didn't fully kill it with his arrow and had to saw its windpipe with a knife. Okay, this is a guy you don't want as an enemy. They then discuss a plan. Dave says in war, what you want to do is chip away at the strongest foes psychologically by taking out small fry to get them scared and wait for them to mess up. He then pulls out a watch with a whale design. Elsewhere, we see Glenn asking Gladys if she's seen his watch. He talks about how much he hates trial days, but says that it's not fair if they don't go and participate like everyone else. On a sadder note, he asks her if she thinks their kids would understand why they aren't coming for them. Gladys says that she can only hope that they know that Glenn and her love them and that one day they might forget. At the city hall, Mayor Laura is visited by Officer Greg. Apparently, he has some new information about Tom's death. They got the analysis back on the hammer and found some fingerprints that belong to Sam and Maggie. Episode 47, That Lonely You. Well, by now it's clear that the trials take place every couple of weeks, and Julian once again takes the stage at the center of town, and in his creepishly positive attitude, he gives a weird speech about how lucky their place is in the cosmos. Then, of course, he hands it over to the mayor, who goes into a long speech. In the crowd, Sam and Maggie don't see Chris and Gina anywhere, which is kind of concerning. Sam and Maggie start to argue. I guess Maggie was the one who decided to put some space between them and the couple, but Sam says they should have kept them close so they knew what they were planning. It's clear that Sam and Maggie's relationship is pretty rocky since they've gotten to Lakeview. They're then interrupted by Glenn and Gladys. They catch up a bit, and Glenn asks if either of them has seen his good watch with the whale on it. He stopped by Sam's stall yesterday and thought maybe he dropped it. Sam and Maggie exchange a concerned look, and then the mayor begins to announce those going up and going down. There's actually only one person going up and one going down, so the mayor says that the trial is simply a formality, but they'll vote anyway. Before it begins, however, Gina and Chris show up and interrupt the trial, saying that they have intel that someone here is planning to blow everyone up with a bomb. They show Officer Greg to some nearby bushes where he finds the bomb. It's obviously non-functional and just put there for show, but we all know by now that Greg doesn't give a shit as long as it looks like evidence. In the center of it is Glenn's whale watch. Knowing what this means, Glenn and Gladys begin to accept their fate. They're actually quite calm about the whole thing, realizing that this would happen eventually and making peace with it. Greg gives them their demerits and tries to move them onto the stage, and they just straight up tell him to off, which made me laugh. As Mayor Laura starts the vote, Glenn and Gladys happily chat with each other, reminiscing on how they met and letting the rest of the world fade away. They tell each other how happy they are, that they got to spend their lives together. It's kind of sweet. Episode 48, Human Dispatch. Glenn and Gladys head into the woods holding hands for their 20-minute head start. It seems Chris and Gina are planning to chase the old couple to a specific location set up by Dave. They point out how creepy Dave looks staring at them from the edge of the forest, and they give him a cool guy nod to confirm the plan. Sam and Maggie witness this, immediately identifying the cool guy nods, and talk about the plan to try and lead Glenn and Gladys to the rebel base. In the distance, the mayor is watching them ominously. The hunt begins, and Sam and Maggie rush in to find Glenn and Gladys before anyone else. Maggie runs ahead and freezes, telling Sam to turn back. But when he catches up, he sees a horrifying sight. Dave standing above a deep pit, and at the bottom, Glenn and Gladys being completely wrapped up and bleeding in barbed wire. Glenn says he can't feel his legs and wants to know where his wife is, not realizing that she's right next to him and that she's already dead. Dave says that she's the lucky one for dying. He says he's not a monster, and normally when he catches a critter, he puts it out of its misery quickly, but he wanted Sam and Maggie to see what was waiting for them, except 10 times worse. He pulls on the barbed wire, clearly putting Glenn in severe pain. Sam tells him to stop, and Dave says if anyone's gonna put Glenn out of his misery, it's Sam. Episode 49, A Good Person. Dave just walks away saying, well, I'll leave you kids to your fun. Sam doesn't know what to do, Maggie's quiet, and Glenn is sobbing over his dead wife. Finally, Maggie says that they should just walk away. She can't deal with this. Sam is pissed. Now she wants to walk away? Glenn speaks out to them, begging them to end his suffering. Maggie just says, I'm sorry, Sam, but it's your turn. That's her choice, and she walks away. Glenn cries out again to Sam, telling him he thinks they would have been good friends, and as his friend, to please make the suffering stop. Sam is taken hold of by a memory. His daughter is sick with a sore throat and begs Sam to make it go away. He says there are some things that daddies can't fix. The fact that he can't make his daughter better actually makes him emotional, and his daughter tells him it's okay, she knows he'll always try his best. Snapping back to the present, Sam picks up the nearby harpoon gun, and we hear the sickening sound of an arrow going through Glenn's head. Sam was forced to kill one of the only good people in this whole society. In the dead zone of the woods, Chris and Gina meet up with with Dave. He tells them that Sam and Maggie will be easy pickings now. They'll start to make mistakes. Chris says, remind us not to with Dave. He tells them to go ahead and get Glenn and Gladys's heads because he doesn't think Sam will have the stomach to cash them in. He also says that he knows Chris and Gina helped Sam and Maggie set him up for stealing the meds. Gina admits it's true, and Dave says now that they have honesty, they can build trust. He'll forgive them as long as they promise that when Sam and Maggie get redded, he gets to take his time with them. Dude, Dave is a bigger psycho than I could have guessed. Episode 50. Did I do that? Sam meets Maggie at the edge of the woods, but storms off without her. Mayor Laura finds her and asks her to come to her office. Maggie asks what this is all about, and Laura says no need to be tense about it. It's not like she's going to bring the hammer down on her. Interesting choice of words there. They make it back to the mayor's office, and there's an interesting detail in the background. A giant version of the painting Judith beheading Holofernes on the wall. Only the characters have cute cat heads. This painting is actually based on a biblical story where Judith gains the trust of an invading general, Holofernes, only to get him drunk and cut his head off with his own sword. Could be interesting foreshadowing, but maybe I'm reading too much into it. Laura says that there have been a few issues that have come to her attention. Firstly, what is Maggie doing out in the woods so often? Maggie plays dumb, but Laura further points out that she seems to specifically be entering into the dead zone. Maggie continues to lie, saying that if she went into the dead zone, she must not have noticed. Laura says, well, here's another one for you. Remember when my husband was savagely beaten to death by a hammer? Well, it turns out that Maggie and her husband's fingerprints were on the hammer. Maggie tries to lie, saying that it was actually their hammer and that Bob and Linda borrowed it right before Tom's death. Laura's clearly not buying it and asks her one more question. Will Maggie join her in the basement? And the bear rug on the floor opens up to a secret staircase. Meanwhile, Sam is standing in Glenn's garden with a can of gas. A red and white apparition of Glenn covered in barbed wire tells Sam not to do this. They chose to live. He relives the moment he had to kill Glenn in his head as he pours gas around the garden. He hears the voice of Maggie from before saying, what do? Follow the rules? Play the sick game? And then we get her back? You really believe that? Sam throws a lighter onto the gas and torches the whole garden, saying, I have to. Then walking away as the whole place burns. Episode 51, Like Heck. Laura tells Maggie she won't bite and once again asks her to enter the basement. Otherwise, she'll have Greg come and talk to her about the hammer. So Maggie agrees and they head down. Instead of some horrific torture dungeon, it's actually an old bomb shelter that's in great condition despite the out-of-fashion 70s style. Laura reaches into a hidden container inside the globe and says she has a really important question to ask Maggie. Neat or on the rocks? Yep, she has a bottle of liquor, and in a shocking twist, we cut ahead to the two ladies drinking and smoking cigarettes together. They're swapping stories about their childhoods like they're best friends and getting drunk. Of all the twists in this comic, this one really caught me off guard. Maggie asks her why she's being so nice when she barely knows her, and Laura admits that she doesn't really know anyone, but she does know what Maggie's really up to in the woods. She knows the rebels are out there and that Maggie has something to do with them. Laura then talks about the origin of the town. Before it all went to hell, she was a pastor and Tom was a sheriff in a little town a few hours north of Lakeview. They lived a happy and peaceful life with their boys until everything went to shit. The government then put them on a fast track to seeing their kids again, but required Laura to denounce everything and burn down her church. They were then taken to Lakeview and Laura was made part of a council. The town's mayor at the time was an evil man named Elijah who abused his power and threatened to red status women if they didn't sleep with him. A real scumbag. So one night Laura snuck into his room and murdered him. Episode 52, For Our Sins. With Elijah out of the way, Laura took on the role of mayor with Julian backing her up. She was still forced to send people up and down every 2 weeks or she'd be redded herself. Someone from the government came and told them as long as they kept sending good citizens up and bad citizens down, they didn't care what the method was. Maggie stops the story here, surprised. She thought that Laura was the government, but Laura says not at all. In fact, the woman they sent to talk to them seemed like she was in the same boat as the rest of us. Unfortunately, even Laura doesn't know who's at the top or why they're doing all of this. She and Julian tried to talk the government representative into getting rid of the hunt, but she said they still needed to do it to reward the other citizens for their community service. They did, however, convince her to let them have a head start of 20 minutes. It seems like Laura actually wants all of this to end as well, but has to try and work within the system. The head start was actually her way of trying to help the Reds get to the rebels before they're killed. We also learned that she's not eligible to go to Hillside as the mayor, meaning she'll never get to see her boys again, but she believes the sacrifice is worth it to try and fight to improve things from her position. She asks Maggie about meeting with the rebels again. She says that she sees a fire in Maggie's eyes, and that Tom must have seen it too as she bashed his head in. Episode 53, The Nameless Monster. Right when we think Laura's finally gonna get revenge on Maggie for her husband, she just says, it's okay. She knows what type of person Tom had become and that he wasn't always like that. Maggie sympathizes with her, saying, this world takes good people and turns them into monsters. Then the two women hug. Later, Maggie comes home comedically drunk and acting silly. With no tact, she bursts out that she's sorry about Glenn and Gladys and drunkenly asks Sam if he forgives her. He's clearly not happy, but says he forgives her anyway. She collapses on the couch and says she has a lot to tell him after a quick nap. The next day, Sam is gung-ho about selling his vegetables, playing up their puny size as a good thing, which actually helps boost his sales. He uses the extra cash to buy some camping gear from Dave, who he's acting surprisingly friendly toward. Chris watches from his stall and relays the strange occurrence to Gina, including that Sam then went on to buy a bunch of art supplies from him. They decide it might be supplies for the rebels, although it doesn't really explain the art stuff. Gina wonders if it is for the rebels, what their move should be. Chris thinks it would be a good opportunity to report Sam and Maggie and get another smiley, plus any extreme rebel activity apparently gets you full demerits and a certainty to be downvoted. It's clear Gina is thinking differently about it. If there are rebels out there, it means there could be another way. Chris says he's made his position clear on this, and that if it wasn't for Chris and him, although it's unclear who this him is, Gina wouldn't be here. And if she's not with him, she's a liability. Okay, clearly there's something weird we don't know about Chris and Gina. Episode 54, Sunflower Boy. Maggie wakes up with a deadly hangover and finds Sam up early painting. A little unusual since he's never done this before. Maggie apologizes if she said some insensitive stuff about Glenn and Gladys last night, and Sam says, don't worry about it, you were just apologizing for leaving me to shoot Glenn in the head. Wow, pretty blunt. Maggie takes a beat and then says she's sorry. Sam says, no you're not, plus you shouldn't apologize, it was my turn. He then asks if they can talk in the boat for a moment. Man, the tension between these two is making me really nervous. Once in the boat, Sam says he wants to help the rebels. They couldn't get to Glenn and Gladys in time to tell them about the arrows, so they need to find another way to gain Judy's trust. Sam talks about how he sold all of his veggies and bought a bunch of camping supplies to give them. Tomorrow they'll put the sunflower out and follow the arrows to the ranger station to give them the supplies. Seems like he has it all figured out and that maybe him and Maggie are on the same page for once. Maggie then tells him all about what she learned from Laura. In the end, Laura said she won't help them, but she wishes them luck in finding the rebels. It seems like they can trust her, at least for now. In the morning, the couple head out and see about saving the world. They set out the sunflower and head into the woods with their gear. As you might expect, Chris and Gina follow them from a distance. Episode 55, Carry the Fire. Sam and Maggie follow the arrows backwards and sure enough find an old ranger station. Judy comes out to greet them and gives her condolences for Glenn and Gladys. I guess she witnessed the whole thing from a distance. She says they can try again next time and figures that's why they came, but is delighted when she spots the camping gear. Sam asks if they can come in now and Judy says she still doesn't trust them enough. He tells her this is a two-way street and it's another 2 weeks till trial. So he offers her a deal. They'll do one more supply run and get whatever the rebels need, but then Judy has to let them in and meet the other rebels. Surprisingly, Judy goes along with it and says it's a deal. Soon it's going to get colder as winter comes in and they'll need to bundle up, so she asks them to get socks, gloves, blankets, and coats. Sam says they can do it and Judy reminds them to put the cactus out if there's any trouble. If their neighbors find out what's going on, it would be the end of all of them. Of course, as she says this, we get a zoom out revealing Chris and Gina watching all of it from afar. They start to discuss whether they think Sam and Maggie are really rebels and if they should call Greg right now, but they have to dive into the bushes when they see Sam and Maggie are coming back. That night, Sam and Maggie get a pile of warm clothes and blankets together. Maggie mentions that something's changed in Sam since Glenn died. There's a fire in him. She feels like for the first time in a while, they're really together again and tells him that she loves him. He says the same, but looks away like his heart isn't fully in it. Something fishy is definitely going on with Sam. Maggie heads off to bed and Sam says he has a few more things to get ready for tomorrow. He looks over to the kitchen table where he was doodling and we see that there's a painting hidden under some pages. What the hell is he up to? Episode 56, How Like a Mirror 2. Maggie wakes up the next morning and finds that Sam never went to sleep. He says he was just too nervous and wants today to go well. Things could be different from here on out. Well, that's ominous. As they leave the house, it almost seems like Sam is crying, but he plays it off. Sure enough, Chris and Gina are waiting to follow them again. This time we hear Chris call Officer Greg with a report. At the same time, it seems Sam is sending a message on his phone. They arrive at the ranger station, but no one comes out. Sam doesn't hesitate, however, and just walks in. Inside is completely empty, and Maggie is a little worried. Why is no one here? Sam lets out a heavy sigh and tells Maggie she needs to stay calm and listen to what he's about to say. He tells her that before they left, he texted Julian if he could put their favorite sunflower plant inside to protect it from frost, and asked him to replace it with the cactus. That way the rebels knew to leave, but it would give Sam a chance to put up some posters. Yep, Sam's sudden new hobby of painting was actually to make propaganda posters about joining the rebels. The posters say to speak to Chris and Gina, a ploy to make it look like they made the posters, especially since the art supplies were from Chris's stall. When Sam bought the camping supplies, he made sure that Chris could overhear him so they'd follow them up here. And hopefully they're doing the same today, only this time with Officer Greg, the perfect setup for framing Chris and Gina. Maggie is in shock. Sam lied to her. He says that he was actually curious about the rebels until he saw what happened to Glenn. And as he put an arrow through his head, he thought, what a pathetic father, what a useless husband. And he decided he wasn't going to let the same happen to him. His daughter is out there, and her dad is coming to save her. He asks Maggie, are you with me or not? Episode 57, Rise. Maggie freaks out, screaming, I trusted you. She really thought they were finally on the same page. She believes if there really is someone waiting for them in Hillside, it's not Sarah, their daughter. Their Sarah would have never left them like that and never said those terrible things. The only reason for them to still be here at all is to join the rebels and try to do what they can before they die. And now Sam's messed all of that up. Sam snaps back at her, asking her, is it really any different than killing Tom? Before Linda reported it, why was she even on Tom's radar in the first place? It seems like he's hinting at something until he finally outright says it. He thinks that Maggie was screwing Charlie. Now we understand the unspoken nugget of mistrust that Sam has had the entire time. He thought that Maggie and Charlie were having an affair. She tells him the truth, that this isn't the case. After all this time, why didn't Sam say anything? He says that Maggie is his sunrise, and he thought that if he just ignored it, the sun would keep rising. He says that she once had to make the call for both of them, and now he's doing the same thing. He's gonna get them to Hillside, and no matter what Maggie believes, they'll see their daughter there. Outside, Chris, Gina, and Greg approach the station. Sam suddenly walks outside and calls out to Greg, saying he was just about to call him to report an incident. He tells Greg that yesterday they followed Greg and Gina here and found some concerning materials inside. They enter the building and find plastered across all the walls and painted on the floor the words Rise, a signal to join the rebellion. Episode 58, Fall. After a painfully long silence, Greg finally says, well, who wants to go first? Gina comes in real quick, saying obviously Sam is trying to frame them. She points out that there's no signal here and they can all be honest. This is all bullshit. Greg says that he actually agrees, but he's seeing a heck of a lot of evidence around. He assumes this can all be traced back to Chris's crafts, and this is confirmed by Sam. Greg turns back to Chris and Gina and says, so where's your evidence? They rage out on him. So what if they don't have evidence? The truth is obvious. After a moment, Greg says he really doesn't care about the truth. His job is to find evidence of rebellious acts and administer justice accordingly. That's why they keep him alive. In fact, this could be a big win for him, and he could get years out of it. He even outright says Sam did a heck of a job and how he must really hate these two. That is, unless Maggie has anything to add. She hesitates for a moment and then concurs with Sam, saying that Gina even asked her to join the rebels during yoga once. Gina immediately calls her a bitch, which made me laugh. Greg says there's really two choices for Chris and Gina. They can accept the consequences of rebel activity, giving them an instant 3 frownies, and they'll likely be voted down to red status. Or they can just leave right now, maybe join the rebels for real, but they'll be turned red status remotely. So it's a real lose-lose situation. Chris does not like the sound of option 2 and says they'll go back with Greg to the protest of Gina. There's a bit of tension, and then Gina asks Greg, what if just one of them leaves? Greg says that the one who leaves would be put down as a missing person and be redded as a precaution, but as long as the other parent stays, it won't be full red status for the couple, and their kid would live. Okay, so we're really learning the nitty-gritty of this messed up system. Hearing this, Gina straight up tells Chris goodbye and says there's no reason for her to stick around anymore. Even Maggie's in disbelief, asking, what about your kids? Then, to everyone's shock, she reveals she never had any kids. Apparently, Gina and Chris are both gay. They're just friends and they only pretended to be a couple so that they wouldn't kill Gina. So this confirms that childless people are basically killed off in this system since they can't be controlled by threatening their children. Sam and Maggie are both still floored at the revelation. Gina says, thanks for everything, Chris, but also f*** you turn into a real dick. Another line that made me laugh. Then she walks out of the station saying, have a nice rest of your life. Episode 59, What Was? As they walk away, Sam is glad the plan went off without a hitch. Chris is in jail, Gina ran away, and they now have two Merritts, getting that much closer to seeing their daughter in Hillside. He looks back and realizes that Maggie stopped dead in her tracks. She coldly says, maybe we shouldn't be together, and that she can't do this anymore. Sam defends himself, saying all he did was make some posters. I mean, she beat a cop to death with a hammer. She screams at him, all you did was ruin our only chance at saving the world. Sam says that that's all a lie, and Maggie tells him the real lie is back there in the neighborhood, or Lakeview, or Hillside. She's tired of this argument and hoping that Sam will change. Instead of working together, Sam just undermined everything she's trying to do. She says again that maybe they should go separate ways. Sam reminds her that he's her husband and that she barely knows Judy and hasn't even met the other rebels. He gets even more heated, asking her what the big plan is, because from where he's sitting, the rebels look like a bunch of no plan, childless nobodies out in the woods who would be better off dead. He has a real plan, and he's her real husband, really asking her to save their real daughter. After a moment, she says, "You're wrong, Sam. None of it's real. Not even him." The real Sam died that day. We get a flashback of only their daughter's voice saying, "Don't come looking for me. Mom, Dad, I love you, and the time we spent together meant so much. I feel lucky that I was your daughter." That's all we get, and man, they're really teasing us here because I want to know what the hell happened. In the present, Maggie says, "She chose them, Sam. That's what's real." Maggie says that she won't get in the way of his plans, but she's done being a part of them. Sam tells her that she needs to calm down and think about this before she says something she regrets, and he walks away, leaving Maggie to cry alone in the woods. Judy then pops up out of nowhere calling Sam an asshole. Maggie tries to apologize to her about compromising the base, and Judy says that she understands. It was Sam, not her. She then makes it really clear that Maggie has a choice to make, Sam or the rebels. Now that Sam is a liability, they won't accept him. After some deliberation, Maggie finally says that she'll join her, but Judy can tell that she's still unsure. She does trust Maggie, however, and tells her that she'll finally show her the rebel base. Episode 60, What Will Be? Well, here we are, folks, the final episode of Season 2. Judy leads Maggie to an old railway museum. Apparently, there was once a whole mining town here, and Lakeview was built as an upper-class town for the mine bosses to live in until the mine collapsed and shut down. They made the museum to honor the workers, but turned Lakeview into a resort town for the rich. They enter the gift shop, and Judy admits that she may have exaggerated the rebels' numbers. We see a group of 4. Nicole, who's missing an eye on her mask, and her husband Tim, who's missing both eyes. Then there's a nervous guy named Hormel whose facial features are mismatched. His mouth is swapped for his eye. Finally, there's someone they refer to as Please Hold, who is actually a child. The only one we've seen this whole series. The kid is holding 2 hatchets and wearing white overalls, and the only thing they say is please hold. So no one has any idea of their backstory. Judy says there used to be more of them, but they had some losses, and that there are 7 of them total now. Nicole and Tim were from a town not unlike Lakeview, but much worse since their leader had the whole town doing forced labor. Nicole stole some bread since they were starving, and when the leader found out, he took Tim's eyes and one of Nicole's. In the end, the town was considered a failed project and everyone was redded. Hormel's backstory is much simpler. When they gave everyone the masks, his was a misprint. This alone caused him to be redded. That's pretty messed up. Maggie tries to talk to Please Hold, but they just stay silent. Judy says they found the kid drenched in blood in the woods trying to eat pine cones. Weirdly, the bloodstains just faded over time. Nicole calls Judy an angel who saved all of them, along with someone named Horace and another person that Judy wants to keep secret. She takes Maggie out back to see the tracks when suddenly a voice greets her. Up on a train is none other than Charlie. His mask is sewn up and he looks to be in pretty good shape. He says he has a question for Maggie because he forgot. Does she like trains? And that, my friends, is the end of Season 2 of Everything is Fine. There is so much development in this season, it makes the first part of Sam and Maggie living in the suburban neighborhood just feel a million miles away. It's pretty sad seeing Sam and Maggie fall apart. That scene in the forest felt like the disbanding of the Fellowship of the Ring or something. It was also interesting to see how Lakeview took things to the next level. Not only do you report your neighbors, you hunt them down. Ultimately, what I continue to love about this series is the constant paranoia. Sam and Maggie don't know who to trust, including each other. And as a reader, it's not cut and dry who we should be rooting for because everyone has blood on their hands. Overall, we got a lot of answers this time around, but also got a lot more questions. I would normally do a theory section here and try to guess what's going on, but many of these questions will be answered in the next season. I do want to recommend, as you guys read through this series, to look at the comments on Webtoons because you get to see everyone's theories in the comments that were posted as the episodes came out. I found it to be a really fun part reading these for the first time when I didn't know what was going to happen next. Shout out to Kill Me Katie as always for the intro and outro music, which is likely playing right now. And if you want to see your art at the end of my videos, email me with a social media handle or name at the address below. But I appreciate you guys watching at all. This is Grease speaking. Goodbye, friends.
From thinking about all that she said, and I'll just look past that. You busted your kneecaps, got to be friendly, no, just got to hold